welcome to An Artist's Dream, the podcast where we share artists' journeys in their art careers to help you find your own path. My name is Alex Agosto, and welcome to the show. I bet if you've listened to the show before, you're like, Alex, what is this? This is something new I'm going to be trying out, and they're going to be Q&A episodes. So, with every guest that I interview, I'm going to be doing my best to collect questions from listeners who have any questions that they have for the people that I'm interviewing. So, if you don't hear your question here, remember we get flooded with questions being submitted. And if you didn't know that we were accepting questions, then that means you're either not following us on social media and that you're not a patron. Yes, we have a Patreon now. So if you follow us on social media or if you're a patron, you will see that there are posts calling out for questions of upcoming guests. And these work for two things. A, you will find out very early on who are upcoming guests on the shows. And B, it allows you to ask them questions that may not be answered otherwise on the show. So definitely check our links below to follow us on social media or to become a patron. So today, we were taking questions for Rainylune or Rachel. A couple of fans had things that they want to know about herself and her business, and those are the questions that you'll be hearing right now. This is from the same interview I did on the episode that was just released a couple days ago. So without further ado, here are your questions. We asked your followers and my followers to ask you questions, and we have a couple here. Many of them were repeated questions, so I'm condensing them. But so one question from Happy Zolly was, do you have any tips for someone who wants to gain an IG audience and or opening an online shop? How about if you could give one tip for gaining an IG audience and one tip for opening an online shop?
My one tip for gaining an audience is to make friends. Your friends will be able to support you, and if you find other people who are doing similar things to what you're doing and in your niche, you can promote each other and support each other and help each other grow, and you're able to share an audience among yourselves and able to grow larger. And then my tip for starting an online store is to have a bit of an audience first. Instead of coming out of nowhere and trying to sell things, I would definitely recommend building upon followers you already have and testing the waters to see, well, I have people who like my art, but do they like it enough to buy a product is the biggest difference. And instead of coming out of the blue trying to sell things and constantly trying to make that sales pitch, it's a lot more natural and organic to just have an audience of people who already like you and then try to transition to that.
Definitely. I completely agree with those two for sure, especially with the online shop. I think having an audience first helps a lot, especially when it comes to investing in products. Next question that kind of like rides on that last one was asked by Lisette Studio, and they asked, "What is there a magic number follower count where you feel like things really started to pick up for your business?"
I can't quite remember exactly what follower account I had. I launched my first Kickstarter when I had maybe 6,000 to 9,000 followers on Instagram for my first Sun the Frog plushie, and that was a good number. I got a decent amount of orders, and then I was able to continue to slowly grow from there. It really depends. The number so much doesn't matter quite as much as the engagement you're getting and the amount of people who are commenting on your post and interacting with it versus having a large number. But if no one interacts or wants to buy the product, then the number doesn't really matter.
Completely agree. Especially Instagram is so notorious for having all those ghost followers, Sometimes
Yeah.
these people you see with huge numbers, a lot of those people are, using throwaway accounts that would never interact with you. And I think people forget that a lot of the
Mhm.
artists you follow have huge numbers, but not every single follower is a true loyal fan. And I think
Exactly.
that's what you need to focus on. Instead of focusing on how many followers you have, focus on cultivating a loyal fan base, because there's like a really famous idea out there that to make a living on art, all you really need is 1,000 loyal fans. 1,000
Mhm.
people who show up for you every time you have exciting launches, because at the end of the day, I think we forget that a lot of our small businesses are being sustained by the same people. You know, it's by
Mhm.
your fans that come back and turn into repeat customers. And that's actually a very important lesson to learn in ecom. The real money is
Mhm.
in your repeat customers. So,
Exactly. I studied that in my textbooks too.
you see, that's the part of schooling you wanna pay for.
Mhm.
But yeah, for sure. Like, don't worry too much about how many followers you have. Make sure the followers that you do have are loyal fans, and if they're not, figure out how you can turn them into loyal fans.
Exactly.
Next question that kind of also is related is from Drawn to Cats. They asked, "You do a lot of storytelling on your feed. Does that come naturally, or do you plan it out?"
I tend to be a little forgetful and distracted and chaotic. So I don't plan things as well as I should. And a lot of it is sometimes I'll think ahead. I think I'm going to post this thing in these next few days, but I don't really have a concrete plan, and it can change depending on what I'm more excited about or what I feel like doing.
Mm-hmm.
So my captions do tend to be pretty spur of the moment. I every day I try to post at 9 a.m. on Instagram, and normally at around 8 a.m. I am drinking tea and trying to figure out what I'm going to say.
Do you plan your feed at all? So, well, I know that your color scheme is pretty, I feel like it's pretty well formed as a brand. Like, I feel like the colors you choose, I see them and I think of you. Like that
Oh,
iconic purple and teal and blue, like those cool color schemes remind me of your work. So,
thank you.
do you use that kind of to plan out your feed, or does your feed just
Not
flow
at all.
because your brand is so cohesive?
I think it just flows because I use the same colors all the time. And
Mhm.
I do not plan in the slightest bit because that is far too much work. And I don't have the capacity to plan that much down to every single detail. I have when I find a good color I like, I have my palette saved in Photoshop. And so a lot of the cohesive colors is due to the fact that I use the same colors every single time, especially when I'm drawing the frogs. I have my one line color, and
Mhm.
occasionally I will change it. And I also just like the same colors and tend to pick them more often, especially with pinks. So that's probably the reason my feed looks as good as it is, because my tastes are very obvious and I go to them every time.
I think that's definitely a case for if Drawn to Cats, if you really like the look of her feed, you might want to look into maybe really sitting down and deciding what you want your brand to look like. Because if you narrow it down to at least some brand colors that you use time and time and again, I think that will help tie your feed together if you feel like that's something you're struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay, okay. This one is also, I think this is the last IG related one. How long did it take you to grow your following to what it is now?
Ooh. Um, I've had this particular Instagram account since 2012 when I first joined Instagram. So I didn't. I was posting art occasionally in high school and early college, and then I started posting fan art more during college, and I grew to a few hundred, and then 1,000. And when I started drawing frogs, that's when my growth really happened.
Mm-hmm.
So my first Kickstarter was at less than 10,000, and then my I don't quite remember the numbers for the other ones, but when I started my Eat a Bag Kickstarter, I was at 16,000 followers, and then over the next 3 days, I grew it to 40,000 and above. So it was
Wow.
very it was very quick, and it happened pretty instantaneously just from the Eat a Bags.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I have continued to grow, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger as time has gone on. But now I feel like I'm reaching a bit of a plateau. I don't know if it's because I'm not paying as much attention to social media as I should be, or not doing any super exciting projects. I've kind of leveled off at 105,000 followers for now.
I
For
w-
now.
yeah, I would say the you're not alone in feeling that lull. I would
Mm-hmm.
tell anyone who's worried right now to remember that in a lot of parts of the world is opening back up. So
Yeah.
you might see a blip in your growth this summer because this is the first summer in a long time that a lot of people will be able to travel, visit family, go on vacations. So
Mm-hmm.
that explosive growth you might have seen in the past year and a half might slow down. And also, from a business perspective, summer is infamous for being a slow period across the board
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of businesses because of the exact same thing I said, but on a lesser scale. Even when there's no pandemic going on, summer is notorious for being slow because of people vacationing and taking time with their family.
Like going out and having fun instead of staring at their phones all day.
Jeez, I know, right? So, don't worry too much about it. I predict, like, I know a lot of people might be panicking, and it sucks to be told, like, you just have to be patient, but it really is a waiting game. I feel like as the summer levels off, you might be seeing that growth again once the novelty of like being out in
Mm-hmm.
the real world wears off. Another question is, do you have any tips for people for social media to make it more engaging for followers?
um, my tips would definitely be to post things that encourage people to interact and comment. So instead of just posting, whenever I post products that I already have on my store, there's nothing really new or exciting. And so those posts don't tend to do as well versus if I have something new I'm working on and I ask people, hey, what do you think of this? People will comment and give me feedback. Or if I post something new, a new product that's coming soon, people will comment and ask me questions about when will it be released and when can I get it, or specifications about the product. So you always want to try and ask people questions, and it doesn't always have to be good questions. It can be something as simple as like, "How are you doing?" or "Tell me this," or
Mm-hmm.
"Comment this." It doesn't always have to be like, people don't have to inquire meaningful things.
For sure. I know that Catnip uses that strategy a lot for people who probably know Catnip or have heard me, interview her on the show before. On her YouTube videos, almost always in the last 5 minutes, she says, "Hey, if you made it this far into the video, comment with a yellow emoji or comment with this emoji," and she kind of turns it into a game to really encourage people to interact with her posts. And
Mhm.
I think that's definitely a great way, like if you want people to interact with your post, ask them to, in a form
Yeah,
of like a
basically.
question. When you leave it up to people, like you don't tell them what to do, then they might not take any action at all.
Mhm.
And the last two questions are pretty fun. I'm going to start with this one. Somebody asked, do you have any pets?
I do have a pet and I talk about him nonstop, and so I'm surprised they don't already know about him.
I
His name is
know.
Mc His name is McDuck, and he is the bestest boy in the whole wide world. He is a West Highland Terrier, and he is my partner in crime, and we do everything together. It also helps that I do not go anywhere, so I'm always here for us to do everything together.
Oh.
And earlier in the interview, he was dreaming, and so I'm not sure if the microphone was able to pick up his subtle woofing.
Oh.
But if it was, then that's the reason.
Man, I love it when dogs do that, like the dream boof, where it's like they're barking with their mouths closed. Ugh, so cute.
Yes.
And then the last question asked was, how did you come up with the 3 main frogs?
Well, Sun the Frog is the one who came from my school project, and based on what I thought a frog might look like. And he looked very dumb. And so that's how I came up with him. And then I sent a picture to my friend, and she's like, my son. And so that ended up becoming his name. And it stuck. And it's a very silly name, but I love it a lot.
I love it too.
For Friend the Frog, I think I mainly came up with him because Sun the Frog, he has a very particular shape and he doesn't work in every situation. And so I needed to draw a different frog. And so I drew a differently shaped frog, and that ended up becoming Friend. And Friend has gone through the most design changes, I think, out of any of the frogs. He used to not have arms. He used to have a smile instead of his trademark O face. And I do believe he always had the bow tie. And eventually he ended up sprouting little arms and becoming a little stubbier and becoming who he is today.
Oh, I love Friend so much. I think that might be my favorite one.
All of my frogs have their own origin stories that I've written about, but I don't think I have really published them much for everyone to see, but they all have their tragic backstories.
Oh, that might be something good to put on your about page or as a blog post, because I think people would absolutely love that.
I've been telling myself to do that for the past year, and so I'm hoping eventually in the next 2 years or so I'll get around to it.
You know what? I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay. And then for Sprout the Frog, I'm not quite sure what happened. He was more of a spur of the moment sort of thing, and I like the idea of a plant frog, and I also really wanted him to have angry eyebrows. Bee and Puppy Cat is one of my biggest inspirations, I think, and I have always loved Puppy Cat's angry eyebrows, and so I wanted to make a character that paid tribute to that, and Sprout was the result.
This was such a fun episode to record. It's the very first time that I have you guys help me out with interviewing our guest. And like I mentioned in the intro, if you want a chance to have your question answered, definitely make sure to check our show notes below to follow us on social media and possibly even support the show and become a patron. Those are 2 ways to have your questions seen and possibly asked on the show. And as mentioned also, the links for Rainylune and her socials will also be down in the description box or in the show notes below, so definitely go over there, check her out, give her lots of love, and tell her that you heard from her here. And until next time, guys, when we find and interview our next guest, this is Alex saying goodbye for now, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!